And we are live. How's my audio levels? I mean, I do see registering there, and I need to maybe go through and do a little bit more. I don't know if that's going to be huge. Okay, that's fine though. Because that will size to that. I'd like to see what the dimensions come to. No, I didn't want to pull you in the corner. I wanted to do that. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. That on. In fact, with me on the screen, can't see the. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for telling me my audio is fine. And we have the pictures. I, I actually I did a closer photo. I had my 5 Model 60s lined up, and the 2 on the end, and this one on the rightmost side in particular has a white power switch, and I made the offhand comment that it had to be a PSU switch at some point in the life of this machine, and that I do have a Red-Switch power supply as spare. But you can see both these machines are marked as 8560-041s. It's not a Model 80 or anything like that on the right-hand side. And sometimes there was, the thought that that sticker was right in front of the power supply, but that's actually on a raised, underneath the front bezel. The front bezel has a window, and there's a raised block in this instance that has the serial number tag, model, submodel. And so let's get, I mean, I do have my 2 spare power supplies here. I could probably even move back and get on camera this way. I mean, I do have that image back on the background monitor. And I've got the spares around. These are actually spares I've had outside the cases. I think I even got this one from Computer Reset in that trip in January. And I've got other power supplies. In fact, every PS2 power supply that I found at Computer Reset, and I wish I'd looked a lot more for other stuff too, I snagged. And real good condition otherwise. I don't think I've blown it out or anything like that. And I might even have another spare one of these, of the white switch models. And okay, so there's the IBM part number. Remember that, 64F3693. Oh, and then the IBM FRU number of 57F 1600. It's a 250 watt power supply. And we have all kinds of danger in languages. And so, and this one for the label, it's called a, this one has a, the high pot markings. I don't know what that label is. ECC C021. And this is, okay, really doesn't have, I wonder if that is missing in some way. And I don't know where I got this one. Okay, and that's on the underside. IBM part number 6278215. And that's a 207 watt power supply. And I mean, as you would probably expect them to differ between the Mol 60 and Mol 80 or 65SX for the white switch as well. The red switch. Yeah. And just how it appears. Get me back on screen here. Okay. Yeah, the just how it mic is muted. Okay, mic unmuted is what it told me. So I have to make sure I don't dip my head sometimes, or if the headset thinks it's off my head, it also mutes the mic. But yeah, I like the look of the red switch in that instance. So, and you know, I found out this, just me tilting my head. No. Okay. My microphone, I don't know if it's just because I'm moving my head around so much or whatever, but it's telling me sometimes that the mic is muted. At least I can look at the audio level. Now, this one, there is also another model that goes through and has a, in fact, I saw it, I think, on the 65SX. It actually has a more of a plastic piece handle that pulls out. These are actually cable ties, actually, nylon cable ties, believe it or not. Just a long cable tie. And of course, this one is broken. I could go through and replace it. You can see the ridges on the inside, and just for that edge, it caught and snapped. Now, I do also have I don't think it has the power supply on this. Okay. So here is the PC and PS2. It's supposed to be PS2 pocket reference manual. There is the blow up diagram with number 14 being the power supply. And it gives all the voltages and everything else, the pinouts of that. And then, I mean, there's a lot of 13s. That's the system board. Okay, power supply, all in parentheses, 250 watts. And we see that 57F 1600. Miscellaneous parts kit. I'm not really sure what that necessarily means. But it says all, and it lists the FRU. Now, you could say, hey, if the technician is replacing the power supply of a Model 60, just like I have in the image here, later on, they may have had the white switch models. Now, yeah, long as power switch is on the PS2s. But so the only real text that has come up, and this is from Lewis Oland. In fact, I have to see if it's formatted. I want to see if I can. Oh, so I was used to the text. Okay. I'm going to need to format that better. Let's do it. Okay. And I think we have to save it. Okay. So I want to even change. Let's go through. Get the best presentation here. And so Lewis Oland referenced, and it's known as it's got the marking of H03297. And it's some text that I'll show here as soon as I can. How's that look? Okay, and that's nice. It makes it bigger. Okay. So do we want to? You're saying just show the text, David. And it's said to be some, European country or countries that went through and specified, nope, stop. Okay, my Bluetooth keyboard did a runaway, as it typically does. You get spurious characters, and it's typically pretty good. Oh, that's beautiful. That a European country, or countries specified that, hey, the something like a power switch to avoid confusion in an emergency has to be non-emergency switches are not to be red in color. only emergency switches should be. Oh, and I didn't even realize I'm not even on the. Come on. No, you're gonna work with me. Why is it extended like that? OBS sometimes is. Yeah. That's like huge, but it's like washed. Since it's so huge, it's washed out. Okay. Okay. So prior to getting my image back up, H03297 is to conform to international safety regulations. The color of the on-off, and I don't know why it has M. Yeah, that's something to do with my when my keyboard ran away. It just says it'd be changed to. Okay. So let me. I don't know why it. Okay. So it's only limited undos. Okay. Why? Because I went through and I saved the text. I'm sorry this is giving me so much issues. Now I have to find where Lewis has that text. Well, okay, so let's get the text off the screen. Get me back on the screen with my reading glasses while I get this going. And I'm just looking at comments. A bunch of those red switches. I'm on a mission to replace every white switch I can find. And, I even brought up on the Facebook group, there is an NCR model, the 3421 or whatever, and it was produced after like 87, 88. And, because it clipped too much text here. And I want to runaway Bluetooth keyboard. I'll tell you. Okay. So I think we're going to have it here. But it was a red switch on that NCR 3421, and that was in the UK. And so there were red switch computers around otherwise. So you tell me. I mean, do we think that there was a European law or some country somewhere that specified that. I've not seen anything that shows that where somebody is able to come up with a law of a particular country or a regulation or something else that talks about emergency switches being white in color or not being red. I mean, excuse me, non-emergency switches not being red. Okay, that's outstanding. We're going to save that. I'm going to minimize that. Text. Okay. Okay. So let me get this on. That's probably a good enough background to be red. Well, it's still. Okay. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a backing board as I read it. Okay. To conform to international safety regulations, the color of the on-off main power switch on many IBM PC and related system units, displays, and printers will be changed from red to white. This change will be phased in by manufacturing during 1988. Some FRU stock will also be changed. And so that even says for the displays and for the printers. And I want to bring up one aspect too. I did the video last night, and I just happened to pull out a 25SX rather than the original Mol 25. And it's true on that 25SX, the power switch is white. Even though it's very small and very recessed under there, it's a white switch. Printers, I know that, for instance, like the IBM color printer and things like that had a red switch. And I don't know how far that model made it. I didn't know that there was necessarily upgrade switches that were put out there. I made the comment on the Mol 30. Okay, so the original 8086 base Mol 30 has a red switch. The Model 30 286, the 55SX, the 53 SLC2, the 55 LS46, all the later systems have a white switch. And for the Mol 30, the original Mol, all that is a plastic piece, and it has a linkage to the power supply inside. The mechanical switch is on the power supply attached by a linkage, and so all you have to do is you have to just change that red or that orange switch on the front. It's a plastic piece. I wonder if certain models had a grace period or that they're already in production, that it would go through and be allowed. I speculated to Thomas and Lewis that was it part of the ISO 9000, which came out in 1987? And that was all labeling things in a consistent manner, the appearance of products would have distinct characteristics in ISO 9000. And so was it, and this IBM quote, it goes through and it says to conform to international safety regulations. So it does reference something, but I just don't know what countries. And it's been speculated it'd be Germany, and that it would have been West Germany at that time for the 1987, 1988. That's before 1991, before the wall fell, before the unification of Germany back together. And so, you know, IBM says all in that pocket reference, the aspect of replacing a field engineer replacing a power supply on the MAL 60. Looking it up, it is the FRU part number of a white switch model. So, and it's funny on the model for the power supply of the page at the Arden tool on the 60, 65XX, and MUL 80, it actually says that these switches are they go through and they get dirty. In fact, I encountered one here recently that the MUL 60 that I brought up from Edgar Digital initially didn't work, and I swapped it out. I actually put in a different power supply, and then later on I got working on the bench and things like that, and I thought, let's go through and test it. Let's open it up and everything. And I figured out that the switch contacts got dirty, and it was true of all the power supplies that had set for a while. The contacts inside there, I had to go through and just the on off to go through and get the contact. And I need to go through and like the deoxide or whatever, I need to spray inside there to clean these switches too. But on these, it's a whole switch assembly. You have to go through and you take apart the power supply that you can slip this piece out, and there's a switch on both the hot and the neutral sides for these. And so I guess they're not worried about a MUL 60 power supply that went out being only 207 watts being replaced with a higher rated power supply with 250 watts. But it looks like at some level in IBM, they're identifying, the red switch versus white switch. But I just don't know what country it is. To pin that down more. I don't know if it was more of an you'd think if it were international, there'd be a lot more backing regulation text to what this is. I just want to hear from what other people think where that regulation, when IBM references international regulation, what is that coming from? Is it, and it looks like it's being defined as European in that case. It looks like it's that that's the international thought. It's not from the US side, it doesn't seem. It seems when IBM says international there, Europe going through that development at that time, and trying to, going through, and as I say, that was the time frame of the ISO 9000 came out in 1987. I don't know of anything that referenced power switches on products in that case or anything like that, but it all makes sense a little bit to me how it lines up with labeling everything and everything being identified in a consistent manner. The joke at the time was that you had a label on something, and under ISO 9000, you had the label identified. This is an ISO 9000 label. That it was labeling and identifying everything correctly, trying to avoid confusion, consistency in how products, and so, I'd like to figure out what countries it is, or see a little bit more text of what things are. And it said, who is so dumb that thinks that something electrical happens and that it needs to, oh my gosh, I need to hit the switch on the computer to turn it off, or to turn off electrical power in the room, or something else. That just doesn't seem, I don't know what the background for that necessarily is. And it's true, bureaucracy is not going to have a rational aspect in a lot of cases like that. Yeah, yeah, and I've talked to other people that interface to ISO 9000 a little bit too, and it's just odd, the 25SX was marketed in the U.S. and primarily to the school system and universities. It was not, it wasn't so much of an overseas system. The EduQuest have white switches, push button, like the PS2s did and everything else. That white, either square or rectangular switch. That was a push switch. And they were in the U.S. market. It's kind of like, I mean, I can understand IBM unifying things and not having different switch colors for the models based on whether it was US or European or whatever, but it just seems that it was really kind of strange. Why did other manufacturers have that? Was it something that IBM misinterpreted, that they saw the ISO 9000 come on the scene and someone at IBM misinterpreted the switch color thing, to say, hey, we should start changing our power switches to white, or whether they seized the occasion too. Somebody that wanted a white switch, a white power switch on things, thought, hey, this is a good way to kind of push my idea forward. Just call it international regulations. They're wanting to go to white switches, and so we need to do that. That reference of H03297, that's that text. And I can't find any reference to where that, Lewis told me where he sourced it at. But that's the only text of that change, is that it's going to go through and that's the only thing it references, that the change in color from the power switches. And then I mean, the Model 30 the 8086 base version had a different power supply connectors for the planer, but it was all the same linkage as the later models. And as I say, it was just a piece of plastic. Yeah, well, I can't get the idea of why a, white switch on a computer is critical, so people will recognize it's a non-emergency switch. It's not that it's not something to flip when something happens to power in the room, or you need to cut power, or you have an emergency of fire or something else, you know, um, to go through and to think of that switch being the, and really on panels, IBM just had the red power switch as a, that was the power. It doesn't, they didn't really have other switches on units that were also red in addition to the, or side by side with the power switches, so that there would be confusion between what the switch did. Yeah, German workplace, and that's what I say is most of the indication seems that it originated in Germany, and that would be West Germany at that time. And I can understand why some switch colors and standing out against the background of why. And, there was even the thought on the original IBM PC and XT and IBM AT that switch was on the back, right. You had to reach back there to flip the switch. It wasn't on the front of the panel. It wasn't, just the design of that system was not to do it. Although you could look at there's even like display writers and things like that had IBM terminals had the rocker switch actually on top, of the logic unit, relatively close to the monitor that was on the swivel at the top of the unit, or not on the swivel. I mean, you had the system 23s, or also the 5120 unit that had the switch on front. And I mean, I think that was a red switch for those. And so, yeah, it's all from the aspect of the Germans, but it's just something like that is regulation that's just forgotten. And also other manufacturers, in particular, of German products, are there German computers, German produced computers that had red switches, or did those go to white as well? I haven't seen any text from other manufacturers. Compaq, Compaq sold systems in Germany, I'm sure. And do they have red power switches, or did they have white power switches? And I think for the later Compaqs, I saw gray power switches and things like that on the front panel. Yeah, West German workplace regulations were absolute nightmare when it came to quality control. And why do you? I guess I'm wondering why that happened. What the occasion was that they felt the need to regulate aspects like that. I don't know if it was to me, it wasn't avoiding confusion to say only emergency switches can only be red in color. What sort of emergency switches are we talking about? Because circuit breakers in the U.S. in an electrical panel are black. It's even the master switch that shuts off all power on the panel is still black, just like any other circuit breaker. And I think sometimes they have windows or indicators that are red that show when the circuit is live. But what are some? I mean, there's the stop buttons, the stop pumps and stop operations that you can quickly slap, to shut things down. But I see those as red and other colors and things like that. I just don't know how to place it. I think it was self fulfilling from the IBM aspect. I think that it seemed like someone at IBM thought that that was the way that regulations were going to go, was to non-emergency switches couldn't be read anymore, and maybe even an ulterior motive of someone liking white power switches and going through, and that's how they push their point across. And yeah, and I can understand for that, but as I say, minor equipment or computer equipment, I can't understand of why the switch on the computer is not allowed to be read, because what does it is somebody that confused that they're just going to start flipping red switches? So I don't know. Um, and so I don't know how lively this discussion was going to be. But give me just a moment here. Going to, okay. 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 Yeah, there's not much background documentation or anything else of things at all. So I'm just trying to pin it down a little bit more of what exactly is there. But so I mean, that just quickly came up as a topic that I thought of for this weekend. I didn't have anything else. It got into like Thursday, and I thought, well, what are we going to do? For a topic when it was kind of late in the week. And so it was as good as any. I mean, I just wanted to hear other people's impressions of the way I was thinking as well. So, I mean, IBM used that, of course, with the introduction of the PS2s in 1990 or 1987. The low end models were red switch models. And I've heard that expressed as, it was initially red switch and then they shifted in time to white switches, but the higher end models were white switches from the very beginning. It was just the initial release of PS2s mainly like the Mall 50 and Mall 60 and the Mall 30 being red switches, and then it changed on as soon as the Mall 70 and Mall 80 came out. As soon as they followed up on the ISA side with the Mall 30-286, that it came to where there were white switches. This text, as I say, it mentions even printers and displays. And I'm just interested in other manufacturers, what color switches that they have on their printers. Even for the IBM big stuff, the IBM mainframe, the stuff that the switch, like for instance, the System 34, very big system, very small power switch. And I think it was actually, it's kind of recessed back behind a cover and everything else. But, would have IBM have gone through and replaced red power switches on a big line printer or something else like that. I can understand that those are high cost items, that the cost of changing out the switch is minor, but how far did that level of thinking go? Yeah, and so John gets to the point of talking about, as I made the comment, I had a the bad, ultimately what I determined, it was a dirty switch because it came back around by cycling it multiple times. I was able to get it to power on. And I would think is there any different of construction? To me, this is white plastic and this is orange or red plastic. The switch itself, I mean, maybe it's newer for the white switch. Maybe it's a little bit modified to change the contact somehow or something like that. But that is the comment on the page for these power supplies, is there's anecdotal information that says, hey, the red switch models fail more. Now, that anecdotal evidence could also be to the point where you start seeing power supplies being replaced. I mean, when the IBM Field Tech came in and couldn't get the power supply to work, and not knowing that the contacts were dirty or something like that, of going through and I mean, I'm sure that there were sprays at that time. Probably deoxit and things like that didn't exist. Contact cleaners you could get inside the switch, but the IBM field technician would have gone through and said, I'm going to replace this with, I'm going to swap out the whole power supply. That's the minimum reduction in parts, that this is a modular assembly that I'm going to go through and I'm going to swap out the power supplies. And I'll do the turn-in of the red switch unit for troubleshooting and deciding if it's going to be scrapped or whatever else. But somebody seeing more white switch units out there could say, hey, those red switch units are failing more because I'm starting to see all these white switches. Something like that. Or just not understanding. As I say, the red switch models are the low-end models. Those would be the first to be retired or be end of life and go out of service. So to have them cycled out of operation, an observer on anecdotal evidence would say, man, I sure see more of those white switch units, because the Model 80, there's 3 386 DX versions of it. There's some system board replacements and things like that. The Model 80 had a longer lifespan than the Model 60 did, being just a 286 model initial PS2. And sure, they were built like tanks and they stuck around everything else, but there are so many much more levels of Model 80 that came out that would have been the computer that really, unless it was a dedicated job that the Model 60 was handling quite well, would have kept it out of retirement, wherever from there. But as I say, that this pocket reference, goes through, and it seems to suggest that the part number, the FRU part number, if your power supply goes out for replacement, you get the white switch version for all models, Model 60 or whatever else. And I'll have to see. I mean, I don't remember if I was the one that went through and changed the power supply for the Model 60 that's here. I don't know if I did it, or I don't know if someone else did it. And it's interesting because I have my PS2s, I have them organized. I have the Model 60s in one area, and I've got them by model number. So from to the left of the Model 60s gets into the Model 70s and the P70s and the P75s and then the Model 80s. So my Model 60s are separate from the Model 80 models. And if I were to look at that case and say, well, that's a white switch, I would have thought that would have been a 65SX or or a Model 80. Now, that's why I brought up that initial talk before, that the label for the unit, I mean, the model, submodel label, serial number label, it's not part of the front bezel. It's an integral part of the case that the unit is in. So this case that is there had a Model 60 planar in it, just like it does now. I go through and I swap boards. I've got reply boards, of course, that they need a home. I've swapped them into cases. That would tell me if a reply board goes in there, I could look at that label still and I could see what that unit was originally. So my thought is that the power supply got switched on this unit, but I don't know when. I don't know when that was done. I don't know if that was me. I don't know if that was someone else before I got the unit. But it just raised the question when I pictured those units, and that last unit had a white switch, and I made the reference of, okay, somebody switched that power supply because this is a Model 60. This would have originally come with a red switch unit, and that just is, it'd be kind of neat opening up this unit maybe and see if I can figure out any details to see if, like, say, the white switch, they had a modification that they did for the handle, and it's actually two pillars and a squared out piece of plastic that pulls out, and of course the slots would have to be modified. I think they're different, but I'd have to look. I've got one white switch unit that has that different handle, and that was probably a later thing that came along, replacing the cable tie, because these would go around that sharp metal edge and they would break. as this one is done. And maybe I can get a little bit more information as I go through of what this unit is, what version of White Switch PSU that's in there. But it's just one of those questions, that came up. Yeah, I know those reply boards are heavily desired, and I made even the comment to Roger when I got the 3 systems down there at Edgar Digital. I said, well, actually, I wish the cases were in good condition. Even if the cases were empty, I would have grabbed the cases because I do have planers that will go in them. Reply planers that have found a home. I've had a bunch of Model 80s as well, and that's been the ones that typically have hosted my reply board. So I'll have to look through. I may have a Model 60. I may have a Red-Switch model that has a reply planer in it too. But I have, because I have 5 good Model 60 planers, and I have one that I just got that was bad. The other 5 planers that are out of cases are good, and it would take very minimal. I mean, they've got CPUs on them. Most of them have SIMs in them. It would be great if I had enough. And years ago, I saw a box truck that had Model 80s, mainly is what it looked like, loaded in there, just stacked so much deep that they're being scrapped. I wish I had a case. I wish I had more cases that I could put those planers in to have working systems again. And of course, that would also cycle through to where, the diskette drives and everything else would have to go through and be put in there and everything else to get a full working system. And it's true. I mean, I have spare parts. If it had come down to where that Model 60 planer that was bad needed to be replaced, I would have been in position to send out a Model 60 planer. I have it for, I've got 5 complete systems that mostly work. It's mostly the diskette drives on them. They've got hard drive controllers. I've got enough hard drive controllers. They've got drives. In fact, one of them has 2 drives in it. The other, I need to get an MFM unit with 2 drives in it. But I've got the Model 60 submodels, the ESDI drives and the MFM drives, well enough represented. And it could be that if I've got 5 complete Model 60s, it's only feasible that I have 5 spare planers, that I would have a planer that I can swap in case a planer goes bad in a complete unit. That, I've learned the commodity of having parts around, of being, of that being the easy thing. I don't go through. I'm not like, I think Roman's still with us. I know he was here earlier, but I'm not to the level of chip level replacement. And in that thought for the Model 60, and I'm glad I had the second planer around that I thought was good, and I connected up a diskette drive to it, and I wasn't getting the diskette to read correctly, and I was worried that it was the diskette, the FDC, the floppy diskette controller that had gone bad, maybe on the planer, and of course being soldered in, but it was a bad diskette drive. Just like, I mean, it'd gone bad before, and then it went back working, and then it went bad again. So I think the 5 planers I have a spare are working. but yeah, I'd love to have more cases around. I'd love to have, um, rather than those being scrapped back in the day, it'd have been great if they would have been kept clean and everything. The cases I got from Edgar Digital, I mean, they're just dirty. That was the main thing about them, was that they were very dirty. And so, you know, but what I'm meaning to say is that, and so a lot of the content, the quotes at the Ardent tool, I mean, that's originally from Peter Wendt, the IBM field engineer. And a lot of the anecdotal accounts are Peter out there doing the job and him going through and making comments on the SIF news group of the things that he found out there. Now, there's been times, I mean, we found, and it happens to everyone. There's aspects that we've gone through and corrected details. We had like the planar ID for two separate Model 80 submols, different planars. Peter had them inverted. That happens, typos and things like that. Anecdotal accounts can, in particular, they're passed down. They can kind of age out, or they can have their inconsistencies or their errors in saying, hey, the red switch units fail more often than the white switch power supplies. Whether there's any substance to that or not, to me, there's not. The switches seem to be the same. All it is a plastic piece. It's different between them. What does the plastic piece matter? It could matter that it's a later manufactured power supply as well, that they got some bugs out of it, engineered it better for later on. But or it's a higher wattage power supply too. It's a 250 watt power supply versus a 207 watt power supply. Could last longer in operation or something like that too. But yeah, I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to kind of kick up some discussion on it and see what people said. That was the topic for this week. And if I'm always open up to video ideas as well. I'm going to go through today. I've actually got to catch up with what Thomas and Lewis are doing. There's some thoughts of taking pictures of the iOmega SCSI adapters, the PC4 and the PC4B. There's some thought of looking at some basic, like the ROM basic routines, the stubs, the sample basic programs. Like I had in the video last night, there were some of those sample programs for the PS2s that were done in basic. And then I'm going to bring up a Model 53, and we may dig into that a little bit deeper. In fact, I need to go through and see if we've dumped I don't think we've dumped the ROM from that yet. So there'll be a chance to get the ROM, and I want to show how there's on the PS2 Model 53 SLC2, the drives are done different. The diskette drive is moved in position from where it is on like the 55SX, and there's a removable panel underneath the diskette drives that wasn't really clear of what drive went in that space, what element went in that space. So I'll be bringing up an aspect of the the Model 53, how it some oddities to it. Yeah, there's no BIOS up for the Mall 53, so I'll get that up. Um, and so I've gone to the case of using planar uh, based on hearing it from the IBM side, and or IBM called it a system board more than but IBM never really did a motherboard concept. The terminology they call it a motherboard, and I've heard that planar crept in from the mainframe side of where you typically had boards that plugged into that backplane or something like that. Um, I frankly I like saying planar a lot more than I do motherboard. Um, and in particular, like the S100 um, computers and stuff like that. I mean, the IBM stuff to some extent too for the big iron was backplanes, and you plug cards into it, and there wasn't the backplane didn't have any logic to it. All it was is connectors, so it was not a mother. It didn't go through and have mother and have children or daughter cards or whatever. And the interesting thing is, why do we call them daughter cards? Why don't we call them son cards? SONCARD. It has a son card in it. Why do we always say daughter cards? And the aspect of the the age, the motherboard is understandable. It hosts and has um, something off to the side for it. But I'm wonder why the convention was to say daughter cards or use that terminology of the feminine gender in motherboard and also the daughter card, a fatherboard, yeah. Um, and that's other thing. I think, as I say, I think motherboard is the concept that it's a card that has smaller versions of it, or other logic components that are attached to the to the motherboard. Um, but I don't know how much topic that is. Of It's not a topic of itself for a Saturday live stream to say let's debate the terminology of planar versus motherboard versus fatherboard versus daughter card. Um, and you see a lot with that. I think the biggest reference there is when someone talks about a country, they always say the motherland. But in some cases, in some countries, the fatherland is more of the convention that's used in those cases. And even for a very masculine aspect of a country, of still calling the motherland or the host, of just the gender roles of a mother. Um, so, and we're not getting into what people call name their computers, um, or anything like that, to whether they give them feminine names or masculine names or anything else. But yeah, ships or she's. Um, and I was on ships. I was U.S. Navy, and the ships, in some of the cases, that you disliked a lot of the aspects around them, and so a terminology or attachment of saying calling the ship she is a little bit strange for me too. Yeah, blame it on the Romans. And Roman's still in chat, I see. Um, I'm not doing any dig at Epitronics to talk about to to link Romans with his name, uh, but he's a Roman too, and maybe in more ways than one, I guess. Or I don't know the origins of his first name. Yeah, Joshua, and he named. I thought in War Games he named the scientist named the computer after. Did he name it after himself or the son that had died? I I can't remember the name Joshua of what the origins were for the name of the computer. And then we talk about, you know, HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and HAL was HAL was an acronym. In fact, I think it was the HAL 9000, and I always got the comment from Lewis Olin when I didn't have the FTP and everything set up that he couldn't access um, the stuff I had set up. He'd always say, Dave, open the pod bay doors. He would go through and, make a reference on the 2001 Space Odyssey. But yeah, I thought that was it. His son had died or something like that, and he named Joshua after his son. Is how I remember it. But yeah, that's what I say is I don't know if it's more ways than one that you're having the name Roman. I mean, I know who I'm named after and everything, but yeah, HAL is better than IBM. And as long as it's not Skynet, too. Skynet war games, we're always having these computers being the bad guy. But I think a good stream otherwise. I mean, lots of chat, lots of views. And there'll be topics that'll come up like this to cover, not necessarily on any machine aspect, although I'll get into those. But I thank everybody for attending, coming by. This time frame is working out very good for me, for viewers, it seems. And I hope that I'm able to keep that timing arrangement up, but there may be some changes coming down in the future. As you see, I'm still in an old studio here, still working on the new studio, still just, it's a slow cleanup process, getting things set up for that and deciding how I'm going to go. And so I'll be in there soon enough. I'm not going to talk about any time frame for being there, but I do appreciate everybody tuning in. And I'm just going to go through and I'll close out the stream. I realize there's other events happening today and other activities. We've been going for over an hour, and that's fine for all the discussion. And I hope it's been entertaining, Hugh. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.